What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are picking up with the conclusion to Flash War, and it's actually pretty cool, and it's sort of interesting. There's actually a huge consequence, well, really two big consequences that come out of this whole thing. One of which you may or may not care about. The other of which most of you will be pretty excited about. So it's a pretty cool thing here. It's pretty awesome. I remember a little bit of catch up here. Basically, the Wally West villain, Hunter Zolomon, is looking to travel into the past and essentially prevent the loss of his legs, basically make his life what he wanted it to be. The problem with this and what the way it kind of works is it's one of those things where like absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what this means is that along the way of trying to gain, trying to travel into the past and fix his life more or less, Hunter Zolomon had discovered that there was the Speed Force, which is where speedsters derive their power from, but there was also the Sage Force and the Strength Force. The Sage Force basically being more of like a psychic force, and then the Strength Force being where people draw their strength from. Now, what Joshua Williamson hasn't really done here is tie this into the greater DC universe, and he may not. And what I mean by that is, if the Speed Force is where speedsters draw their power from, then is the Strength Force where like Superman and like Solomon Grundy and like, super strong characters, is that where they draw their strength from? And like all the psychics and people like that, do they draw their power from the Sage Force? Is that how that works? That may or may not be tied in. DC usually keeps things confined to character-driven arcs, so like a Batman story arc, Superman story arc, Flash story arc, but we don't know if in this instance, these forces will spill over into the rest of the DC universe and say, well, this also affects Superman and so on and so forth. There's no reason to believe they don't, because the Speed Force permeates the entirety of reality, but only the speedsters can tap into the Speed Force and use Speed Force powers. And so because of that, it's kind of interesting. It's really a fun little caveat. And so for the most part, it was basically it was Wally and Barry trying to track down or trying to stop Hunter Zolomon and keep him from going crazy. The problem is that with all these new powers, there's really not much that they can do to stop him. Now, the other thing here is that because of what he's doing, because of the fact that he basically ran to the past and started changing things up, what this meant is that he was essentially eradicating the 25th century where he comes from. And that's the reason why you have like Commander Cold, who's from the 25th century, Iris West, and New 52 Wally West, who are just kind of stranded in this void, more or less, this what would be the 25th century, but isn't there anymore. Now, the way in which Hunter Zolomon was able to do this was by manipulating something called hypertime. Now, hypertime is a weird idea. A very weird idea in the realm of DC Comics. The best way I know how to say it. So take DC's publishing comic book era, like when they were publishing comic books, between like 1938 when Superman first showed up and like 1984. Basically what you had like different Earths, quote unquote. They were given like numerical designations. So you had Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, Earth 4, and the numerical designation was designed to do nothing more than to basically say, this is a different universe. That's all it was for. What DC did is they said, these universes have always existed. Earth 2 is the age of World War II superheroes, the golden age of superheroes, basically. And then Earth S was where Shazam, that's where the whole Shazam family was. And Earth 1 is all the superhero stories that involve, Barry Allen and that Justice League team and so on and so forth. All that ran until about 1984 when it became too convoluted and complicated to understand, for new fans anyway, and so DC cut it all loose. They dropped it, they canceled all that stuff with Crisis on Infinite Earths. And after that, they said now there's only one universe. And that ran for about 14 years. And the reason why is because in 1999, Grant Morrison and Mark Waid had this idea of saying, yeah, but like we want the multiverse back, but we can't really have it back. And so what they did is they created Hypertime. And Hypertime was DC's attempt to copy Marvel's multiverse. In Marvel Comics, you only ever had one universe, but then like a thing would happen where you would create like a divergent universe based on that. So like in the main Marvel universe, Peter Parker gains the Venom suit, right? The Venom symbiote suit. And then in the main Marvel universe, he travels back to Earth and he meets with Reed Richards, and Reed Richards says, actually, that suit that you're wearing is alive. It's a living, breathing organism. You should get rid of it. And so Peter goes to a bell tower. He starts ringing the bells. The suit hates the sound, all the pain and everything, and leaves, and then eventually bonds to Eddie Brock. Thus, Venom is born. An alternate reality would be, what if Spider-Man never stopped being Venom? Then like that would be an alternate reality story. But that alternate universe exists because it branches off of the main Marvel universe. DC tried to copy that. And what they said is, in addition to branching off, sometimes it'll loop back and intersect with the main DC universe. The problem was that it was actually more complicated than the multiverse they had before. And it seemed really, really unnecessary. And so fans didn't really like it too much. Now, all that turned out to be a moot purpose because in 2006, they brought the multiverse back with Infinite Crisis. But it was an attempt to kind of have the multiverse without actually having the multiverse. And so that's kind of what Joshua Williamson is doing here, that Hypertime exists. But this is only a temporary thing, because as they're running through and as they're literally like racing through, and we're seeing like these different realities, these different universes, or really these different points in time where you have like the Flashpoint fight between Barry Allen and Eobard Thawne. You've got Barry dying during Crisis on Infinite Earths. You have like all these different eras in history of DC. You also have like Jai and Iris. It's like them as adults in the future. And so it's kind of cool to see this thing unfold, because as they're racing through, they're actually seeing their life the way it could have been, because Hunter Zolomon is changing things as he's racing through time. Like the very act of doing it is essentially changing things here and there. Not massive things, but things that are small enough that they can have effects later on. They can basically create ripple effects all throughout the time stream. They can have like big ramifications. And so it's kind of cool here, because like when they're going through, Hunter Zolomon's whole stance is like, but I don't understand why you're trying to stop me though, because Barry did it. So why is it okay for Barry, but it's not okay for me? And it's interesting because Wally had the exact same stance. When Wally was like, I want to go back in time and I want to stop all this from happening so I can have Jai and Iris. I want to prevent Manhattan or whoever it was from messing with the time stream. So, nobody forgets these last 10 years and I've got my kids and so on and so forth. And Barry's like, no, you can't do that. And the way that Barry comes off here, that's kind of the funny thing. The way that Barry comes off here, both to Wally and even Hunter Zolomon, is don't do as I do as I say do. If you go through and start changing time, you're going to screw things up in really bad ways that you can't even really imagine. And when you go back to change it, you can never go back to the things the way they were supposed to be, or at least that's the opinion Barry has. Of course, we know they were because of what Manhattan did. Things didn't, but still, the fact remains here that it's interesting because Hunter Zolomon, initially was not going back in time. Now he's kind of gone mad with power. So he's like, I'll create create the universe to my liking and everything will be the way I want it to be. And it's a little disappointing. Joshua Williamson is an incredible writer, but it's a little disappointing because Hunter Zolomon kind of falls into the cliche villain role. Like, I have this amazing scheme and this amazing desire, and it's so human because all I want to do is just change my past and keep crappy things from happening to me. But now I've got all this power, I'm gonna remake reality in my image. And it's just kind of like, okay, I understand, but like I kind of like it seems a little cliche. But even then, like it's still a cool idea. That's one of the reasons why Joshua Williamson's Flash writing is so awesome, because by and large the characters are so human and so solid in terms of how they're being written and how they're being, how they're being given to us. And so the fight here is actually pretty awesome. It's basically a speedster fight, but as they're going through and as they're literally facing off against each other, what ends up happening is that it's kind of hard to explain. When you have Wally fighting against Hunter Zolomon, he almost creates like these Speed Force constructs. Now, when I say create Speed Force constructs, I don't mean like creating like Speed Force lightning or something like that. What I mean is actually creating what are essentially Flash equivalent of like Green Lantern hard light constructs. And these come in the form of like Jay Garrick and Jai and Iris and like Max Mercury. And it's just like these speedsters we haven't seen in forever because it's kind of like, my family runs with me, that kind of a thing. And so that's why these moments are awesome. That's why these things are so important, is because this is like a one little moment thing. And like when the story ends, it could be like in the next issue, Barry's kind of like, so let's talk about those constructs you made, Wally. And it's like, yeah, man, I have no idea what that was or how that works, but like we should try it again. And suddenly he's like sending people after, sending Speed Force constructs after people. But more so than that, it's kind of Joshua Williamson's tribute to like the speed to the Flash mythos. Because if you're somebody who picked up with the Flash in DC Rebirth and never read anything before, then Flash fans will tell you you're really missing out. Because people who sit down and who have been reading the Flash for years and years and years and years, running all the way back to like Jeff Johns' Flash Rebirth, the original Flash Rebirth, and even before that, they look at people like Max Mercury, they look at Impulse, Bart Allen, they look at Jay Garrick, these different members of the Flash family, and it's like, but it's not a complete family yet, because all you have really right now is Wally and Barry and New 52 Wally, and that's really about it. This cohesive family unit of Flashes doesn't really exist, or at least it's not there right now. And so it kind of leaves people wanting to see that return. And so for people, who are looking at this as kind of a small glimpse of how things could be, where all these different speedsters are going to start making their return. And so it's kind of it's a really good sort of feel-good moment. It kind of hits people right in the feels, with regards to how they feel about the Flash mythos and the speedsters they want to see return and all that kind of good stuff. And so essentially what ends up happening is you basically have, in the aftermath of all this, because of what's happened with Hunter Zolomon, the Speed Force has in fact been broken. And the result here is that while speedsters can still tap into the Speed Force, what it means is that with it being fractured, there's no means to travel back and forth through time. Basically, hypertime's gone. It's destroyed. Time travel is destroyed. Like speedsters cannot run back and forth through time. Now, this is with regards to speedsters. And that's why like the Sage and Strength Force are two distinctly different things, because when it comes to speedsters traveling, like running back and forth through time, originally that all started with Barry Allen's ability to like vibrate through dimensional walls, right? Like to vibrate through these sort of universal barriers that separated one universe from another. Now that went away after Crisis on Infinite Earths. And because that went away, the question was, well, what's Wally's ability going to be? What's going to make him unique in comparison to everybody else? We'll just let him be so fast he can run back and forth through time. Like just have that be the case case for Wally, for Wally West, that was his thing. Like, he was able to mainline the Speed Force and by doing so, run back and forth through time. Barry had to use a cosmic treadmill to do that, even before he died. When you're talking about this, it basically means that like the ability to move back and forth from one point in time to another to change history doesn't exist anymore for the speedsters. Now, initially it kind of seems like, okay, well that's cool, I guess, but that's a pretty big moment actually. It's a pretty significant thing because what it means is no more flashpoints. What's going to happen, at least as far as Joshua Williamson's writing goes, is from the time from this point until the time he stops writing, then there will never be an instance of time travel. It'll never be an instance where they will run back into the past and quote unquote fix things. And that's actually a genius idea, because a problem with time travel, because Bendis was really guilty of this back in the day, but the problem with time travel is it's basically used by writers to write themselves out of a hole. It's like, well, I mean, I have this really cool story and like, you know, it was awesome up until the end, but I don't know how to fix it. So time travel, and they just jump back into the past. But with hyper time, with the inability of Flash is being able to travel back and forth through time, what it means is that Joshua Williams is basically telling us, as long as I'm writing the Flash, consequences are consequences. When something happens, that thing is happening. Now, after Joshua Williamson leaves, then it could very well be that, well, you know, somebody will use time travel and fix things and so on and so forth. That's the nature of writers. Writers just kind of bend stories to their own whim and write whatever stories they want, so long as, you know, editorial's okay with it and fans don't give them too much hate. But still, that's really kind of the big thing here. But the big moment, the big takeaway from all of this is that as a direct result of the actions of essentially breaking the Speed Force, a speedster has returned. Another speedster has popped up. And this speedster is Bart Allen, also known as Impulse, not Bart Hoare, not the crazy religious guy from the future, but the original Bart Allen. And this is a huge moment. Now, if you want to know more about Bart Allen, check out my video down in the description. I have a video on Bart Allen Explained where we run over his whole character. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about this story. And I will catch you all later. Peace.